Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and I am joined by two amazing, wonderful, fantabulous gentlemen I love very much to do something very near and dear to our hearts. And that, of course, being reviewing movies. It wouldn't be the Movie Bears podcast unless there were multiple movie bears. And there are, and let me introduce you to said wonderful, fantastic men. We have Jim Pugliaffica with us this week. Hey, Jim.
Thanks, babe, and welcome to the podcast, everyone. I'm looking forward to this one.
Indeed. Good to be back. And we've got Will Lindis here with us as well, who is freshly back from Fantastic Fest. Hey, Will.
Hey guys, I've somehow managed to survive Fantastic Fest without catching the Fantastic Flu, so I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah.
Although my flu last year took about 3 days to incubate, so fingers crossed, Will.
Oh, I don't want it. I don't want it.
Start drinking gallons of OJ and taking airborne if that works. I hear it's a myth, but
beware the scratchy throat. That will be the end.
I heard that the whole vitamin C thing, like the emergency or the airborne or stuff like that, like it's not supposed to actually prevent you from getting sick, but like vitamin C is supposed to still, if once you do get sick, it's supposed to reduce like the amount of time that you're sick by like 5% or something like that. And I'm thinking I'm chugging it right now just because, just in case, I would rather have like 5% less sick. Sure, I'll take that.
Why not? Get your Sunny D on, right?
Oh, I'm all about that Sunny D.
We like a whole lot of Sunny D on this show. Anyway, we've got a fun show for you guys tonight. We're already getting punchy. We're going to be reviewing Hellfest, the new Halloween-centric film about a traveling, scary town attraction thing. And mayhem ensues when a serial killer is maybe on the loose and following a group of teens. But before we get into our review for this week, just a couple of housekeeping items. One, we want to say hello to those who have joined us for our live show. Looks like we've got a few folks hanging out with us already.
Sammy's here.
Yeah.
Hey, Sammy.
That. Hey, Sammy. We're gonna see Sammy in like 5 weeks, 6 weeks.
Yeah, something like
Palm
that.
Springs. So, or maybe it's 8 weeks. I don't know. Between Hawaii and Palm Springs, like the dates are jumbling in my head. But that does bring something up. Next week for the podcast, we're actually going to be taking next week off. I know we've had some scheduling stuff the last few weeks. Will had a festival last week. Next week, Jim and I are going to be in Hawaii. So the week after, we'll be coming back at you with a review of Venom. And we may also talk another couple of movies. So stay tuned for details on that. But guys,
thanks to everybody for hanging with us through some of these scheduling, movements. We've switched days. We've taken weeks off. We've got 2 episodes going live, going out this week. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. But that just thank you for the folks who have kind of stuck with us through this time.
We find that it's really important to us to moving an episode forward a night or back a night lets us still keep, even if not a regular weekly schedule, it still keeps some momentum. And I know that that's important for shows. It's important for us. Like, these conversations give us so much life. We know it's hard to sometimes plan your calendar around, but we just appreciate you hanging with us.
We do. So to that, I say, listeners, thank you for being a friend. Traveled down the road and back again. Your heart is true. You're a pal and a confidant. We appreciate you. Sorry, little Golden Girls. Anybody?
No, it's great. And I think that there's the thing that we're going to confide in them is how we feel about a new release movie. That's something.
Oh, goodness. It is indeed. So last housekeeping item before we jump into that gift we're going to give is, if you are on the fence about Hellfest, maybe you've seen the trailer, maybe you've never even heard of the movie, you're not sure if you want to see it yet. A, it's October, so horror movies are coming out. And B, we're going to talk about this movie totally spoiler-free. Unlike other podcasts, we're like, we promise not to spoil you, but like, here's the whole ending of the movie and what I think about it. We will protect your virtual innocence where the plot of this movie is concerned, and give plenty of fair warning before we kind of rip the Band-Aid off and go into spoiler territory. So feel free to hang out with us for the next, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes while we talk about Hellfest spoiler free. And when we do give you that warning, feel free to step away for 10 or 15, 20 minutes. Come on back for plugs at the end if you're listening live. If you're listening through the magic of digital tape delay, of course, on iTunes or Spotify later in the week relative to when we record, use that handy-dandy time index in the show notes and skip ahead as appropriate. All of that said, guys, our spoiler plate warning is done. Are we ready to go? Non-spoilers on Hellfest.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
All right, then. Let's go to Hellfest. ... Here we go. All right. So, we'll have you go ahead and kick things off for us. For anyone who maybe isn't familiar with Hellfest, or maybe it's been a hot minute since they've seen the trailer, give us a little bit of the setup for this film, and maybe tell us a little bit about seeing this movie after a week of seeing movies like it was your job. What was the experience like?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was pretty interesting, actually, to do a genre film after doing a week of genre films. And not an unwelcome thing either, because this is kind of where my brain is dialed into right now. So Hellfest is a slasher movie, a rated R horror film that features a group of they're not quite teens, so I'm guessing like kind of like young adult, like college age-ish, like maybe early 20s or so. A group of friends who go to this pop-up horror-themed amusement park called Hellfest. The group has differing dynamics, but essentially it's 3 males and 3 females. Each one sort of paired off into little relationships. And there they soon find out that they are being stalked by a masked slasher, a killer. And so this plays out across this Halloween theme park with many of the other patrons all around, none the wiser. Geez, wow. This movie didn't work for me. I'll start with that.
I thought you were all tuned into genre.
I am, and there's a possibility, huge disclaimer, like maybe I've seen other things that were stronger and I'm unfairly judging this one, and that's very, very possible, but there were some things in this movie that just did not work for me, and those things are unfortunately pretty numerous. I'll start with the one thing that does work. I like the premise. I think the premise to this is really cool. I am a haunted house junkie. We have some haunted houses here in, not quite in Austin, but in the outskirts that are similar to this. I think some of the production value in these this haunted house here is pretty unrealistic for a pop-up, but the idea and the premise and like the ones that you can go to where they're full contact and the scares and you go to this maze and that one, like all of that was really, really, really cool. And the idea of like there being a legit threat within one of these was a lot of fun. But where it breaks down for me is multifold. The performances were not solid for me. I think that was a huge detracting element. The 6 actors, the 6 kind of friends, don't do a particularly phenomenal job, and that's unfortunate because I've seen these casts, some of these actors in better things. Bex Taylor Klaus, she is
great
in a
name.
few different. Well, yeah, great name. She plays kind of the friend who's a little more like rocker, like with the leather jacket.
Mm-hmm.
She was one of the leads in the Scream series. She was. She was in she's in Glee. She was in Arrow for a bit. She played Sin in Arrow. Yep. And she plays the voice of Pidge in Voltron. Like, I mean, she has been in some things that I like. Just like the lead actress in this, Amy Forsyth is in she is currently in the show Rise, which is sort of, I guess, like the new Glee, and she's going to be playing a major-ish role in Beautiful Boy, which like is one of those like maybe it's going to get a bunch of Oscars or at least be talked about movies coming out later this fall. So this is not while this is sort of a new and inexperienced cast in the grand scheme of things, this is not a bad cast. It's whatever direction they were given or whatever script work they were given or however these things are edited together, it made all of these actors come across as way less skilled than they are, because some of these line deliveries are really, really rough. The script doesn't help them at all. I hated these characters. There were several moments where some of these characters like get out of a jam kind of by the skin of their teeth, and I'm kind of actively rooting for the villain to just do it already and let me get to the lobby a little bit quicker. I was even hoping for, like, sometimes you get these movies like this where at least the kills are fun. And I don't even think that was the case. Like, I didn't get any like fun. Like, there was maybe one good like gory kill. The rest were pretty inconsequential in the grand scheme of things, or didn't kind of deliver up to the premises. So this is a hard pass for me. In fact, I would, if you're thinking that the premise sounds cool, I would actually point you in the direction of a movie on VOD right now, directed by Owen Edgerton, called Bloodfest, which is not like a movie of the year type film or anything like that. It has its issues as well, but it delivers on the a bunch of people are being stalked in a haunted amusement park festival thing. Way better.
Oh, you mean, so this isn't like an original idea?
Yeah. So both Hellfest and Bloodfest came out within a few months of
I'm
each
shocked
other.
to hear that.
Believe it or not.
So yeah, hard pass. Sorry.
All right. Hard pass from Will. Jim, how about for you?
Yeah, I find myself very closely aligned with Will here. This movie didn't work for me at all. Like right from the get-go. I didn't really know much about this movie. I think we had seen the trailer once, maybe in front of another movie, and we're like, oh, okay, it's Halloween themed. We'll go see it. Could be fun. Didn't really have much fun with this movie. And I think it's because the movie the movie itself takes itself pretty seriously. And that's, a fault of the script. And you talked about the actors. I'm not putting any of the blame really on these actors. So yeah, some of the line deliveries were a little bit clunky, but I really attribute that to the script and the direction. None of these characters, to me, with the possible exception of the lead character, and we'll talk about that in spoilers, none of them were characters that I'd even want to know or hang out with or get to know better. So I didn't care. And Will, like you, kind of toward the end of the movie, I'm like, okay, I think I know which character might survive this movie, if anybody does. But can you please kill off the rest of these people like quick? I just want to, kind of get to the end. I will also, Will, and you spoke before me, but I had these ideas too, that the story setup was okay, but as we said, it's not really original. I know I've seen, the stalker in the haunted house who's dressed like one of the characters at at this haunt or whatever. We've seen this before, and I don't think this one did that much to kind of put a fresh feel on that. I thought it was competently shot, in terms of the way it looked. I thought it was fine. The whole thing, almost all of it, takes place at night and in this haunt, which, by the way, was pretty amazing. As I'm watching this, and the characters are going through this haunt that's been set up, I'm like, I've been to a couple of haunts. Like locally, we have one here in Tucson called what is it, Brad? Help me out.
Nightfall.
And it's set in like an old West town, but it was nothing like the theming on this one. I mean, this one looked fantastic, and to the point where it was kind of unrealistic and took you out of the movie. Like, come on, I've never seen anything that looked quite this good with this many different kind of rooms and setups and scares. But I would just say this movie didn't provide anything new, although maybe that's a little bit unfair to expect of this movie. I just didn't care from the get-go about it. Brad reminded me, he says, what do you expect from this movie? It's not, it's just a Halloween slasher movie. And I'm like, yeah, I get it, but I've seen the same thing done better, and I've had more fun watching it. So I'm also in the hard pass category, unfortunately, for this movie.
Wow,
So,
not an encouraging.
Brad, save us. Please save us.
You know what? I am going to save us. I'm going to go to bat for this movie.
Excellent.
I feel like your callback to my comment yesterday is a good one. I'm glad you said it, because for me, like, I pretty much knew what I was going to get going into this movie. Like, this is a horror movie out in time for Halloween. Thousands and thousands of people are going to these attractions right now. Our very own Nightfall is starting up. People are starting to go to that. And so, it's very topical. I think back to Haunters from Fantastic Fest last year. And so that was very much on my mind, sort of that love of the scare going into this movie. And so I'm like, I was looking forward to seeing this movie, even though I knew it was probably going to be a steaming pile of stuff on the screen. And so, I don't think this is a great movie by any definition, but I do think it accomplishes kind of what it sets out to do. I mean, basically you have a group of teens being stalked by an evil killer through this attraction. Some folks are going to die. There's going to be a final person who lives and maybe triumphs in the end, ? Those are all expectations we have going in. And I felt like the film really delivered on those things. I also think I have a cat on my desk who will not fucking try and go away from walking in front of the camera.
Wait, the cat's got a knife. Watch out, Brad.
Yeah, she's got
Black cat
20 knives.
Yeah,
it is a black cat. But yeah, so like for me, going into this film, had certain expectations. I think it definitely met those expectations and more. I think it did some really clever things with subverting even some of those expectations. Like, a person will hear a noise and they'll go to investigate that noise, or they'll see the person like creepily standing in the smoke, and you think that they're going to like go a certain way, and then they do the opposite. So I have to give this movie some credit for trying to do something a little bit different. I wouldn't say I was legitimately like taken by any of the jump scares, but like the main dude was pretty creepy, and we'll talk more in spoilers about some other things that happened. Nerys, get in your cat bed. But I feel like overall it was a fun movie. Halloween is coming up. If you're looking for something really funny to see, a scary movie maybe isn't your idea, but it had some fun elements to it. I thought some of the jokes, especially the Bex Taylor Klaus character, you mentioned she voices Pidge on Voltron. And I'm a big fan of hers. I loved her on Arrow. It was really great to see her here, and she kind of provides some of the dark humor for this film that I thought worked well. So I'm on an island all by myself, but that's okay. I thought it was fun. Obviously the new Halloween movie is coming out. That's probably going to be the big, you guessed it, Halloween movie of this year. But we still got a little while until that comes out. So this might be worth checking out. That's my opinion. I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, we have a few weeks before Halloween gets distributed. One of us was lucky enough to see it already, but we won't talk about that at all. But
not a bit.
But we're looking forward to talking about that. But this one, Brad, you mentioned the scares, and like none of them scared me. And there were actually times in the movie, I had given the movie props earlier for its, it was competently shot. I thought its production values were fine. But there were some scenes in this movie where you knew somehow they, in almost every instance, they telegraphed the jump scare, like to the point where like, okay, I know it's going to happen. Here it comes now. And boom, it would happen kind of right on cue. If you other movies have kind of messed around with that timing a little bit to make the jump scares more effective, this one didn't try to do that. Also, there were some times where like a person walks into a room with a bunch of figures, right, that are like, I don't know, stabbed against the wall or something. And you know that one of them's gonna jump at the character to try to make the audience jump and our characters jump. And you can actually see the thing moving like before it jumps or breathing or like.
Of course, but let me ask you a question, Jim, because we went to one of these things a couple years ago and we had the exact same experience. Like, isn't that true?
They're terrible
to real life. I mean,
typically they're not great. But this was one that was done in a movie, and I think they all, you know, the setups were great. The movie had the opportunity to make the scares work better. That's all I'm saying, and I wish they had, because I wasn't scared. Yeah, I see what you say about the character. What was her name? Help me out with the Pidge character.
Her nickname was College. That's all I remember.
Yeah. Well, her name was Taylor, I think.
Taylor. Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually thought she was going to be the lesbian character, and I was kind of disappointed when she wasn't.
She's played a lesbian in I believe it was in another show. I won't spoil the other thing that she's been in where she played a lesbian character, but she has played that role. So your pings on your radar.
I was getting that. I was totally getting that vibe, and I'm like, okay, she's going to be the lesbian friend, but no. So I guess the movie did subvert my expectations there.
Yeah, I'm kind of there with you, Jim. Like I felt like it didn't. It would sometimes what it did very well was it set up some very remarkable set dressing. Like, I will give it all the credit in the world for like making like a neat looking haunted house or set of haunted houses where you kind of felt like you knew the geography of the rooms, and you understood sort of like how they translated from a real life haunted house to the on-screen version that you got. And so I think all of those, like, it wears its motivations like very firmly on its sleeve. And I appreciated those. I think that's where then it loses me a little bit, because I don't think it always or often utilized those settings or scenarios in a way that maximized the scares. Like, I felt like in some cases, just watching someone actually legit go through a haunted house is more terrifying than the elements of slasher stalking someone in a haunted house, which I don't think translated as well, or never really like made me feel like the edge or the danger. And I think part of that is the design of the villain itself felt aimless and felt a little uninspired. And in some places, even kind of with what he would use for the different kills, like felt like just sort of convenient and regurgitated. So it's just like you watch a slasher for either the tension or for the fuck yeah moments. Like there's two ways to watch one of these, and I didn't get either of those.
I think part of the problem is the very premise of the film. The premise is they're going to an obviously bad haunted attraction, and like, you know, how do you like make that better? Like, it's a pop-up event. Yeah, it's more extensive than like your normal pop-up would be, but you know, even going back, I was rewatching parts of Haunters today on my lunch just to kind of compare. I'm like, oh my God, it's like the same thing. Like there's parts of that documentary where they're showing footage of people getting scared in these things. And Jim, kind of to your point earlier, it's like you see this room full of people. You can see one moving in the night vision, right? And then sure enough, it jumps out at them and they're like, ah. So like, I don't know. I felt like, serial killer aside, this was kind of true to life in a way. I don't know, as a filmmaker, if anybody out there is a professional filmmaker, maybe you can tell us, if you go with this premise, how you can improve it to the point where like it is seriously like bone chilling, super scary, you know, kind of predicated on that.
The one thing I might change, and I was thinking about this in kind of in real time, like sort of that same thing, like, you know, how would you fix this? Like, how do you change this? How do you make this premise scarier? And I think for me, the way the film edited itself was in such a way that it didn't want you to ever not know where the killer was. So like there would, like, whenever like you would like see the characters talking, there would then be a boom, and then it would zoom over here and you would see them being watched, or boom, and then it's over here and you see a part of it, or whatever, you know. And there were like, because so much of this movie is about them being sort of unknowingly stalked, Like, I think if they had taken us, like, if they had straight up just stolen a page from like It Follows and was set the camera slightly further back from the characters and had the actor that was the killer sometimes in the background watching them without doing a zoom in so that the audience could pick up on it or not pick up on it, like, I think anyone that saw that would be incredibly unnerved and would then be watching the crowds and would be watching the background the whole time, so that when they walked into the haunted houses, they'd be watching the backgrounds a lot more because they've already been trained by the film to know that that thing is back there, and it may not always be very readily apparent where he's at. Something like that.
You could you mentioned the movie Haunters, which was a documentary about different people, different groups who had set up these haunts in various parts of the country, mainly focusing on a few of them. That might make a good narrative movie, to take one of those, like one of those extreme haunts, and make it about the twisted people who like were running one of these. That could be pretty interesting. Maybe, I don't know. That's not what this movie was, and I don't want to. I'm not saddling this movie with wanting it to be something that it's not. It just never worked for me, and I think for me, again, I'm a character guy. If I can't get into if I can't hook myself to any of these characters and feel the stakes, then I'm just kind of flapping in the wind a little.
You got to hook or knife or axe them or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, I don't know, it becomes more and more difficult to talk about this film without going into spoilers. Like, I'm thinking of several things I want to bring up, and it's like, can't do that.
Can't talk about that.
Yeah. So I think this is kind of a logical point to go ahead and transition us over to our spoiler segment. So before we do that, though, just real quick, I wanted to give a shout out to a few folks who are chatting away in the live chat. We've got Bobby Miller here. Hey, Bobby. JP Wendell. JP, always good to see you. Jordan was here. JP says you could go more supernatural with it, like Hell House LLC, perhaps. That's an interesting suggestion. JP, for sure. Also want to give a shout out, guys. We have a brand new listener listening for the first time. His name is Jackson. Hey, Jackson, glad to have you with us this week. Welcome to the show.
Excellent. Want to hear from these people in the chat.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody saw this movie. We may be the only three in our community who saw this movie.
My theater was just me, and granted, it was a Monday afternoon, so like I take this with a grain of salt. But it was me and then two dudes in the back row who were like just not into it.
Yeah, maybe
bound to happen.
Maybe I was pissed off because I had to tell somebody to put their phone away at the beginning of the movie, like 10 minutes in. Like they were sitting maybe 3 seats down from me, and he has the phone out, full brightness, and I'm like, hey, dude, could you please put that? I said it nicely. I'm like, hey, do you mind putting that phone away? It's like super bright, and I'm seeing the whole thing. And he put it away, but it's just having to do that in a movie. It has you thinking, like, why do I need to tell somebody that?
Why do you go to another place, like spend the time and the gas money and all of that, and then pay $10+ to do something that you can do for free on your toilet?
Right. Yep. I know. That's a pet peeve. Sorry for the aside, but that may have impacted my ability to connect with this movie a little bit.
Someday there's going to be a movie, and maybe we'll make it. I don't know, where there is a character like Jim, who's like a middle-aged, like dad kind of character who goes on a serial killer rampage, following people who text during movies.
Yeah. He's a movie lover who goes to movies and waits till assholes take out their phones and don't put it away. And then he finds interesting ways associated with the movie that they're watching, like kind of in theme with the movies that they're watching, to kill the person.
So that movie right there that you're describing would be great, because there's a lot of movies that are slashers that have a scene like that where someone talks and they get killed, but not a full movie about it. And all of those movies get immediately mined for pre-movie PSAs at the Alamo Draft
House. I was just thinking about that.
So if you did a full movie of it, like they would be set. They would be set for life.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and move on to our spoilers section. If you've not yet seen Hellfest and you want to go in, with your innocence intact, now's your time to step away for probably about 10 or 15 minutes and then come on back for plugs. But guys, it is time. Awkward ramble, awkward ramble, awkward ramble. Okay, we are good. Where do you want to start?
Well, I'll start by saying, were you guys thinking earlier on in the movie, were you guys thinking as I was trying to figure out which of the main characters, which of the set of half a dozen main characters was going to be the killer? And then you were disappointed at some point when, oh, it's just going to be some random guy.
I wasn't, only because in fact, I may have enjoyed it more if like there was more to think about in those on those fronts. But the characters were already in the park and doing their whole thing, and then it showed like separately from behind the killer walking in,
right?
Yeah,
cut to his boots, and then pulled the mask out after we'd already established the other characters were there. So he becomes this sort of unrelated seventh entity. For me at least. And, I don't know if it would have necessarily improved it or not if I thought he was, maybe it's one of them, or maybe if that secretly had been that. But I think what did take me out of it was, so with horror, there's two ways that you can find sort of like emotional attachment to something, whether or character attachment to something. You can either have a really compelling cast of characters who are going through whatever their issues are, their relationships, their motivations, their stresses with one another as they play out over this horrific night. Or you can have a villain who is, even if the teens are fairly disposable, literally disposable, if you have a very compelling or charismatic or interesting or enigmatic in a good way slasher villain, then you can latch onto that. But I think what we ended up here with was a group of 6 kids who were relatively paper thin. I think Bex did try to elevate the material. I don't think she was able to, and I think she was the only one that I think was really putting it, was really kind of rising above the work. And the killer itself was very was always not only always shot from behind, but for a big portion of the movie was interchangeable with other people in the on the campgrounds, which I get why that happened from both a jump scare perspective and from a moving the plot around perspective. But what it did do is it diminished the character of the villain. So I couldn't even be he's not an iconic villain like the baby face villain from Happy Death Day. That mask was super iconic. I was always terrified when that thing was on screen. I wasn't with this one because he just felt like a generic slasher killer.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm weird, but I feel like this movie did enough that now I don't want to go to our local extreme haunt. Watching this play out, I'm thinking back to when we went before, Jim, and obviously we never had anyone like that following us around the park, but
if we did, we didn't know it.
Right. We had someone following us at a county fair one time, but that's a little different. That was a Miss Growler connection. But it's one of those things where now, I think back to last time we went, and do you remember, Jim, that building we went in where it was totally trippy and psychedelic with like murder written on the walls, and you can only see it under UV light. Do you remember that attraction at all? Okay. So one of the rooms you go in, and on the walls, they've got these laser projected time tunnel, moving light patterns. But the room is full of all these different people just standing in position, just like we saw in the movie. And it's when I went through it that time, my attention was so distracted by the trippy lights flashing all around as we're walking through. I didn't even think about that one of those people could, or one of those things could be a real person. And sure enough, it jumped out and was grabbing at me, and I was laughing about it. But now I'm thinking, like, God, like, what if I were to go to one of these things and not only is one of those things like a real person, but like, you know, someone who wants to do harm. You know what I mean? Like, we're intentionally putting ourselves in positions where, like, you know, people could have a fake weapon or it could be a real weapon. You know, you think about gun violence, God forbid. Like, what if somebody went into one of these things and instead of having a fake, you know, cap gun or something, like it was a real gun? How easy would it be for them to like get away, you know, if they were to do something crazy like that? So maybe the movie itself wasn't phenomenal and super great, but it's definitely made me think about my willingness to put myself in that kind of risky position.
I mean, what you described there were like, and granted, it was a few different times in that, like, were like 3 or 4 other movies that I think could have been a better use of this same premise. Like, yeah, you mentioned like, oh, it was a joke, but like kind of like, oh, the misconnection on Growler, like follow you around. I'm like, okay, holy shit, that's actually like a really interesting like LGBTQ horror premise. You know, and granted, there's LGBTQ horror before this that borrows from that, but like I would watch the hell out of that movie. Seeing the cap gun replaced with a real gun type thing, like, yeah, we saw maybe a little bit of that in Child's Play 3, the weird boot camp one, but that was like the one good scene in a bad movie. Like, I think that could be like, that type of thing could be redone in a very compelling way, and I think that's where I keep coming down to on this movie. Like, I feel like I keep wanting to like come up with like, well, what if they did this to fix it? What if they had done that to fix it? And like, I keep wanting to come up with ways to make the material stronger. And I wish that somewhere in the script process that the writers had done that. Yeah. Because horror is, even bad horror can be fun or can be interesting. Like, there's a lot of things that horror can do, even if it's not like, you know, It Follows or The Babadook or something that's like more of like kind of the critically acclaimed type stuff. I just feel like I hate to say it felt lazy just in terms of like the actual scripting of the story. And these types of scares deserve a little better than that.
Yeah. Some of the scenes though did work. I mean, I couldn't mention this pre-spoiler, but the scene where they see the killer for the first time actually killing a girl that wasn't in their group, or see somebody actually getting murdered in one of the haunt rooms, and it's like you could see the look on their face, like, okay, is this a real abduction and murder, or is this just part of the show? And we as the audience kind of knew it was like real. And the horror of that moment comes out of that, because, you know, you have people witnessing this, not realizing it's real, and the girl's crying for help and everything. That was a pretty effective scene for me. But the film didn't have enough of that kind of thing to kind of keep it going for me. But,
I've got a weird little nitpick about that particular kill, because I think the movie might have forgotten that they killed that character, only because like the final scene of the, or maybe not the final scene, but like at the end there's like a news report that's saying like there was a masked murderer who was at this haunted house, and 4 people were killed, 2 of which were propped up inside of the attractions themselves. Well, her 4 friends died. Yes, that's absolutely true. 2 of which were, you know, killed inside of attractions, while 2 were out in the crowd. But that girl also died too. So like, I know it's like nitpicky, like, oh, maybe the police didn't just find the other one, but like,
yeah,
you know, there was another like kill. I
didn't even think of that, but
they could have very easily like padded their kill count with a kill that they already know existed. Like, you know, a killer that kills 5 is better than a killer that kills 4. Like, it's like, I think they might have forgotten they'd made that kill, or something happened like in the rewrite process and they just didn't catch that. It's not the end of the world, but it is just like, it stood out and it shouldn't have stood out. Like, kill counts are easy things for major kills.
What? Well, I'm not even going to get into nitpicks, but I mean, what did you think of the very end of the scene where we don't get to see the killer? We don't get to see who the killer is, but we see the killer driving home in his soccer mom van, and pulling up in his driveway, going into the house, and his little daughter, I guess, is asleep on the couch, and he puts all those killing stuff away, his mask and his weapons and locks him up in a cabinet, and he's like daddy again. I mean, that's kind of a chilling thought. But it felt like kind of a cheat maybe to the audience. Like the audience didn't even get to see like who this character was. And you got the sense because he puts the mask away in this cabinet that has 6 or 7 other mask types in there, right? So you're like, oh my God.
Like little trinkets and stuff.
You're like, oh my God, I'm looking in one cabinet. I'm looking at all of the sequels that they're going to make from this movie. You know,
or prequels.
Or
like,
prequels.
Prequels, yeah.
Or prequels.
But it just would have been nice to see a little bit more about the killer. I don't know.
It's neat. Like I like what they were going for. I think the idea, and JP kind of calls it out in chat. Like he says, it sounds like they were going for the horror of random violence type thing. And I think that's what they were going for. Like the fact that this dude is just some random dude, like he's the guy who lives across the street. He's the next door neighbor. He's your doctor. He's your mailman. He could be anyone. I think that is potentially chilling. What I wish they had done instead, I didn't even need to see his face. Like that's immaterial for me personally. But the way they shot that final scene added a false sense of tension that rang so false that it kind of diminished like what they were going for, because he walks into the living room and he like starts humming his creepy song and like
Pop goes the weasel.
His fist, and the daughter goes, "Daddy!" And so there's this pause where you're like, we know that she's the daughter, just like he's not gonna kill her, and then she says, "Daddy." Like I wish they hadn't gone with that. Like they could have very easily just had her walk into the room, the girl immediately pop up and go and say daddy and hug without adding that kind of that false speed of like tension there.
And then goes into Pop Goes the Weasel.
It wouldn't even need that. It doesn't even need, I think the normalcy of that scene, like if it had just gone from like he puts away his horror stuff and then walks into the living room and she immediately goes daddy and hugs him and like he's just like, "How was your day, pumpkin?" I think that is like, at least for me personally, way more chilling, because it's not like this like kind of overblown like serial killer thing. It's like it is really just a normal dude next door who just did these terrible things.
I have a question for Brad.
Yeah.
We've been married for almost 2 years, together for about 10. Do you have like a soft spot for slasher horror type movies? No, it's a serious question, because I don't know. I have
a follow-up question to answer.
I mean, Brad seemed to have resonated with this movie, maybe more than I did, certainly more than I did. But I'm just wondering if he has like a affinity for these kind of movies.
Here's what I'll say. So JP in the chat mentioned earlier, maybe this movie would be more effective if it had a supernatural component. To me, the supernatural components are what completely make horror movies not scary to me. I don't really get scared by supernatural stuff. I do, however, get scared by messed up in the head fucktards who like would exert violence on other people. So like growing up, like growing up, like your Nightmare on Elm Street, the first Nightmare on Elm Street, kind of scary.
Yeah,
I saw it when I was like 4. That freaked me out. But like, you know, Jason Voorhees and like all these other slasher, like supernatural killers, Jeepers Creepers, whatever, didn't really do it for me. I liked the original Halloween movie a lot because, at least in the first movie, he wasn't a supernatural force. He was just a crazy guy, like going on a murder spree. Scream, the first Scream movie, really freaked me out because I was in high school and I knew people that I was pretty sure like could be under that, you know, Scream mask and would kill people. So I think because it's more grounded in reality, it just resonates with me more. Like I think about myself in those kinds of positions. I wouldn't say that's true for every like realistic slasher movie though. I think maybe it's got to be movies that like resonate with things that I've done in my life. Like I've never been a reporter tracking down the wrong story and, you know, have a serial killer after me because of it. But I have been at a party with crazy people at doing stupid things, or, you know what I mean? So do I have a soft spot? No, but do they resonate with me because I know crazy fucking people who might do some things like that? I would say, yeah.
So if they have make sense? So if they have a real world hook, like in like that kind of makes you think that something like this could happen without the supernatural stuff. Those are the ones that work for you. Yeah. Fair enough. So I forgot about your love for the Friday the 13th movies. I totally forgot about that.
What I thought you were going to ask, Jim, and that's why I laughed, was you said, all right, Brad, we've been together for 10 years. We've been married for 2. Do you have, and this is that was the exact point where like I was a different direction. I thought you were going to say, do you have a secret box of masks that you've used? In your like, I thought you were like going that route. Like, are you secretly a serial killer? So when
you know where I hide my murder instruments?
I thought you were going for that joke.
I do collect thumb drives from each person that I murder, though.
There you go. Like and their thumbs as well. It's a very eclectic.
And he already has one of mine.
It is yours. Good thing we have a joint insurance policy. Oh crap! This is taping live. I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
Blown.
I know this isn't plugs, but Brad, if you get a chance, there's a movie that came out this year. It's on VOD right now. It's called Summer of '84. That, based on some of the things that you said that you liked in horror, I think you would quite enjoy this. I don't know if you've had a chance to see it yet. It's
no.
So if you get a chance, I think that like the things it might hit a lot of those spots.
I'll have to check it out.
Is it a horror?
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay.
It's like if Super Dark Times was good.
I remember that movie.
Yeah, it's like a good version of that.
All right. Well, I think we've gotten all the mileage we're going to get out of Hellfest because we are very off topic, but that's okay. Guys, how do we feel about maybe moving on to some plugs as we look to wrap this mother up?
Let's plug it up.
All right, Jim, go ahead and start us off. What do you want to plug tonight?
I was turned on to this documentary from this year, 2018, that I heard about, I think on another podcast initially, called Minding the Gap. And I finally caught up with it. It's on Hulu right now. So if you guys have Hulu, you can watch this. This documentary was like one of those like out of left field surprises for me. I wasn't sure what to expect. I didn't know anything about it. All I knew was the title. People had said it was great. It's called Minding the Gap. The title, I don't know what significance the title has to the movie, but basically it's a documentary made by this young filmmaker who's been involved in a lot of films, even some bigger films, as like a camera person. He helped shoot some of them, like Get Out. I think he was involved in that. I'm not sure what else, but anyway, the movie is about this group of mainly three friends who are friends because they all skateboard together from a young age. And the movie follows these three people from adolescence through like early adulthood. It's kind of like the skater punk version of Boyhood almost. It's kind of what it reminded me of. And it's really amazing that this guy like was filming his friends, like doing skateboarding tricks, and did this over so many years. And the movie's totally not about skateboarding. It's about human relationships and how these people have matured. And it's about some things that they've gone through in their lives. And it has a lot of heart. I really love this movie. It's called Minding the Gap. Check for it on Hulu. Give it a chance. It's a documentary. This disclaimer, as I'm watching the movie at the beginning, I'm like, why do I give a fuck about these three skateboard kids? Because they're all getting on my nerves. They're doing this stuff. Like I can imagine them like grinding on my front walkway, and I'm not liking these kids. And then all of a sudden, you're hooked into these characters and the people that they are. Yeah, I really loved it. Just very surprised by it.
Well, mind your gap.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, how about you?
So my plug is going to be a a fairly large plug in that, like, I'm going to plug Fantastic Fest in general. I just got back from this large genre film festival. It was 8 days of film. It is the largest genre film festival in the United States, which means films that are like horror and science fiction and action and foreign language dramas. There were a few films that this year, for example, that were each of the, I think like 3 or 4 that are on the long list for Oscar nominees for different countries. And that tends to happen. Like some really good foreign language films show up here. So I ended up watching 37 films over those 8 days, which is is a marathon. But most importantly, I had a chance to record some thoughts about some of those films. So there is a podcast that is in your feed. However you found this episode, if you came to us via Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher Radio, there's going to be a Fantastic Fest episode. If you came to us via YouTube, we're going to have something up there for it as well, so you can listen to those thoughts. But it was a great festival. I've got to see things such as the new Suspiria movie that's coming out soon, Gaspar Noé's new film Climax, Bad Times at the El Royale, Jonah Hill's new movie Mid-90s. Got to see Apostle and the new Halloween, and got to see Tenacious D, both their new animated movie and, actually Tenacious D, and the new film by the director of It Follows, which is called Under the Silver Lake. I got to breathe the same air as Jamie Lee Curtis. I got to sit for the Tenacious D thing for very obvious reasons. I decided to sit in the front row so that when they were doing the QA afterwards, I could be like right there. And that was really nice. Got to see Jonah Hill and Elijah Wood, Elijah Wood every year, but it was a very fun experience. I have so many thoughts about so many of those films. Please check out that episode or check out my letterbox for some of those thoughts. Or if you're just really curious about some of those films, feel free to message me and I can tell you what to check out and what to avoid, because I'm not going to review all 37 of them here. We would be here all day.
Right.
Well, and Will, I do believe, sorry, Jim, Will, I do believe you had a couple of guests on that show with you, Matt and Simon, who I'm so bummed we did not get to see. Of course, we're bummed we were not able to go to Fantastic Fest as well. It was that or Hawaii, what out? But how was it recording live on the spot with Matt and Simon?
It was wonderful. Like going into the festival, I was like, well, there's a couple of different ways I could do coverage. And at first I was like, well, I'm going to interview just a few random people that I see there for their thoughts. But it's not Movie Bears podcast if it's not like a trio of husky, hairy, huggable homos. And if I don't get my 2 favorite HHHHs, my Brad and my Jim, I need to get some good bears on the ground. And Simon had been staying with me for the festival. He has a background in film review and radio in Australia, where he lives. And so he was an obvious pick. And then Matt Shiverdecker, who does film reviews for the Austin American Statesman. And we talk film all the time. It was just like, well, and he also has an internet radio background. So it's like, well, gosh, like my cup doth runneth over with bears to choose from. So it was great recording with Matt and Simon. We had a lot of really good conversations through the course of the festival. In some cases, we had some really cool consensus where we all walked out of the thing going like, oh yeah, like that was great. And there were a couple of cases where we were just absolutely on different pages on a film, and that was just as fun.
Yeah, well, I got to listen to it a little bit I listened to it a little bit as I was helping doing the final touch-ups on the editing. And I also was listening to it on the way home as I wanted to listen to your countdown. I got about halfway through. But yeah, great job from you and from Matt and Simon also. So thanks to those guys for contributing to what is a podcast episode that you guys who are listening to this should go back and check out. If you want to hear about some cool movies that those guys saw. I was following your stuff on Facebook and, was kind of living vicariously because, as Brad mentioned, we were lucky enough to go last year to Fantastic Fest for the first time. We loved it. Just, sad that we couldn't go this year, but we have other things planned. So
you got your trip coming up, and that's
I think I'm kind of maybe aiming myself to it next year, Brad. We'll have to talk about that.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely should. I think, I mean, Simon has, I think we've got him hooked. Like, so he came in from Australia for his first year last year. And this year he's like, I've got to come. And this time he brought his husband, Ben, although, Ben got to travel to other parts of the United States during the festival, so that he wasn't just like sitting here at the house as another like festival widow. And then he came and joined us for the last part. And Simon's already talking. Of course, this is it's a huge financial thing and a vacation thing to plan out, just because it's a large trip for him. But he's thinking about coming in for like maybe even for Egglift through Fantastic Fest next year.
Nice.
So that's still up in the air, but like, oh my gosh, it'd be so cool if he's if that's able to actualize.
Absolutely. Well, glad you had an awesome time. I haven't listened to the episode yet myself, but I will at some point, probably after. I don't know. I'm very like terrified of being even remotely colored or influenced about Halloween, and I don't know when that came up in the discussion. So
go ahead and just wait until after Halloween. While all of our discussions and we do talk about it in the podcast, and while all of the discussions there are spoiler free, we do talk about just sort of like the premise and setups of the films and our impressions. And I know you're trying to go into it like purely blind, and so I think just wait until afterwards, and you can hear what we thought and say like, yeah, I agree, or no, fuck you guys, you're wrong. Like, you'll be able to have those reactions live. What's neat though, I found out that Jamie Lee Curtis, this has nothing to do with the movie, but in her QA, she is an avid WoW player, World of Warcraft player. I did not know that before, but like, she kept bringing the questions back to both that and I guess what the guy that created Five Nights at Freddy's, the game, was like in the Scott Cawthon. He was in the audience, and she kept getting kind of like, oh my God, he's here. Like, she was so excited about that because of like playing that with her son, that she was as interested in talking about Five Nights at Freddy's as she was about the movie, which made me love her even more. It's just like, it was such a cool thing for her to see her like get giddy over.
Well, maybe you'll run into her at BlizzCon someday. Well, you never know.
Maybe. I hope.
All right. Well, for me this week, I'm going to plug the new Venom movie starring Tom Hardy. I have been looking forward to this movie, God, since it was announced, forever. Venom is my favorite anti-hero character ever. Sometimes he's a villain, sometimes he's a hero, sometimes he's kind of in the middle. I've been going back, Will. I signed up for Comixology Unlimited. So I've been going back and reading like old school comics of like Eddie Brock as Venom, Flash Thompson's stint as Agent Venom, like the whole run I've been sampling. So I love being able to pay my $8 a month or whatever and just dive into these past comics. But then I was like, wait a second, I'm reading so much Venom. Like, what's going to happen when I now see this movie and it's different? So I'm like, all right, I'm going to back off from that and give myself some time to reset my palate. But I'll tell you, especially like coming on the heels of finishing the Spider-Man game. Will, I know you're probably going to start that soon now that Fantastic Fest is over. I'm super, super hungry for this film. And and spleens. Don't forget spleens.
He's thirsty.
Pancreases. But yeah, so I'm pumped. I don't know, Jim, if we'll have a chance to see it before we fly to LA Saturday and then fly to Hawaii Sunday morning.
Our flight is like midday, so no, not on Saturday.
Yeah, not on Saturday. We can look maybe for showtimes. When tickets initially went on sale, we weren't sure what day we were flying, what our travel plans were, so we kind of missed that window, but we'll see. Otherwise, they do have movie theaters on Oahu, so maybe we can
sneak out to one.
I hate to fucking carve out like beach time to like go see a movie, but maybe we'll figure something out. But anyway, it's out this weekend. If you're looking forward to it, go check it out. Even though he'll be covered in black goo most of the movie, I mean, I think Tom Hardy's pretty hot.
Maybe Tom Hardy can get it.
Yeah, totally. So maybe that's going for it too a little bit. We'll see.
This is the real Tom Hardy, not the one in Upgrade, right?
Right. Yeah. This is actual Tom Hardy and not poor man's Tom Hardy. But just a quick reminder, we are taking next week off because, as I mentioned, Jim and I will be traveling. We will return with our review of Venom the week after. We may also talk A Star is Born. I know there's a couple other films, one of which you saw at Fantastic Festival. Maybe we can add into the mix and talk about it as well. So we'll let you know what's coming down the pipeline. I'm rambling a lot. I'm trying to close this up. I see in the chat some people are saying goodbye. Bobby Miller, great to have you with us as usual. Glad you enjoyed the show. JP, Sammy, Jackson, everybody else, glad to see you as usual. And folks, this is episode 297 of the Movie Bears podcast. We are 3 episodes away from our big
tricentennial.
Is tricentennial? Oh, you just read my mind, Jim.
Love it. Yes.
I think we said it at the same time almost, but the internet was a little delayed. I heard you speaking from the other room, and then I heard you over my audio feed.
It's our tri-cinematarial. No.
So yeah. Guys, we're running out of time to figure out what the fuck we're gonna do for our 300th episode.
So I have a few hours on the beach to think about it.
So the solution is we do episode 299, then we do episode 301, and then we just come back to 300 later on, like when we figure it out. Like just plug it in later in the queue.
Oh goodness. We'll figure something before that.
Yeah.
Well, listen, you guys have a wonderful rest of this week and next week. We will be coming at you when we get back. Have a great week, everybody. Thanks so much for hanging out with us and your flexibility with our crazy schedule. Goodbye, everybody. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Venom.